On today's episode, we go from a Phrygian idea to a fully fledged song. Welcome back to another Make Loud Monday. This week, we're going to take a look at all the work that I've done in the past 6 or 7 days on the song Gypsy that I started last week in the Let's Get Phrygian episode. Just to quickly recap, we started out with the idea of the A major Phrygian scale. Just kind of got that by piecing together some basic patterns and recognizing it was a scale. Kind of built out some bass tracks to it, a couple different pieces, and talked about, different opportunities that I might have for reorganizing them or layering things on top. So in the past couple of days, I've actually done that, and I'm going to share that work with you right now. So we're going to flip on over to our Studio One screen, and let's quickly go over what has happened since then. So the very first thing, you can see that, a lot of this work is already done, but I'm just going to recap it for you. So the first thing was I realized that while I was recording, I had set my sample rate too high. Sample rate is basically just how the digital software, processes the digital effects and so forth in real time. If you have a high sample rate, it will not glitch out and have popping noises and so forth, but it introduces some latency. And the problem with that is that if you use that high sample rate while you're recording, you'll sometimes get lag and a lot of timing issues. And I forgot to correct my sample rate, so my timing was really off. And especially in longer passages, it's, your ear learns to correct things. So in the beginning of an 8-bar section, the first 4 bars I would be way behind the beat, but then I'd be hearing it and I would make the correction so I would catch up. So I couldn't even just shift things. What I needed to do was I needed to use the quantize toolbar. So you can see this up here. You can kind of set the sensitivity to it, half note, whole note, half note, and so forth. I set it to 16th note. Originally, I think I'd actually set it to 8th note. And then you can set the visibility of these individual tracks to show the bend markers. So if I click on that, you can see that by hitting the apply quantize tool, that it put in all these different markers and it corrected things. So red is where it kind of squished something out, and green is where it kind of stretched something out. And you can see that there needed to be a lot of small corrections. So, and that's okay. Small corrections are fine. So it went from being kind of all over the place to where it's now right in the pocket. So you can see that the bend markers line up with the grid lines, and it matches the rhythm. So that was a really important step, just to get it where, you don't want to build upon a shaky foundation. So I made sure to go through the step of quantizing the timing. And you can overdo this at times. Like, obviously everything is smack on. There were some places where there were some errors, and when I corrected those errors, I made sure to let them be a little bit off the beat, because you don't want it to sound robotic and mechanical. It should sound like a real performance, because it was a real performance, just a real performance that had errors that needed to be corrected. So let's go ahead and turn all those bend markers off. So now we just see the waveforms. And that was the first thing that I wanted to do. And then the other thing was that I noticed that the playing was a little bit staccato, and there were kind of gaps in between some of the sections. And I knew the way that I wanted to correct that was through applying some reverb. And I didn't put reverb into the recording using pedals or using the reverb effect in my amplifier, because once you have that, you can't change it. Instead, I decided that I was going to use some of the digital effects here and use a sidechain technique. So I'm actually going to flip back over to here, and we're going to go here and select a display capture, turn this on. Here, we'll move this up. Okay, there we go, infinity and beyond. Okay, so now hopefully you can see the full screen here. And it's important because using the video software that I have, it doesn't always show the pop-up windows. And I want you to see that because it's pretty important. So what I've got here is I have an effects channel right here. You can see it, called Reverb. And in it, I've got a reverb plugin and a compressor plugin. So the reverb plugin itself is this cathedral sound, very big. You know, you can see it has a 3.26 second reverb tail length. The mix, because it's on an effects channel, is 100%. And it's, you know, a big room, a 20-meter room. So it has a big echo to it. And I wanted that, but I didn't want that to muddy up the whole thing. So I used this compressor plugin, and you can see that there's an opportunity here to sidechain it. And I've sidechained it to the whole bass bus. Since I had 3 different parts, I wanted it, rather than letting the sidechain listen to the individual parts, just listen to the bus, which aggregates them. And you can see that at 32 decibels, it starts to really clamp down on the signal. So a 5.6 ratio, a little bit of a knee to soften it, and then a really fast attack time and a somewhat longer release time. And then I also put in a low cut because I've heard it enough times that I've started to believe it. Applying a reverb effect with very low frequencies just gets you nothing but woofiness. And I wasn't going for woofiness. What I was going for was volume and space. So here, we'll take a listen to it, both with and without the reverb sound. So we're going to solo the bass bus, and then I will turn off these inserts. Actually, I will mute. Can I do that? No. I will turn off the send. There. So it's not sending the signal. So this is what it would sound like if we start out here. I'm going to listen along with you. So you can see how that's very dry. And now if I turn the sends on, let's listen to it. So you can hear how it fills it out. You can also hear that we've got that problem with the sample rate. So you can see my sample rate's really low. This is what I use for recording. So I'm going to set it to the highest. And now if we listen to it. So putting the sample rate up got rid of that clicking and popping. So now I just have to remember to turn that off later when I go back to recording mode. But in mixing mode, you want to turn your sample rate up. So I applied this reverb, and I think it sounded really good. As you can see, it didn't add a lot of woofiness. It just kind of filled it out. It gave it a lot of texture, a lot of ambient sound. So that was the next step in the process. And then after that, the next thing that I did was to add some orchestral instruments during this long section here when we go to halftime. wanted to add something that had kind of a theatrical component to it, and I knew that this meant for me going into some orchestral instruments. And the two that I added were just a basic cymbal crash, and I used this make sure you can see that. I use this plugin here. It's the Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra, and you can see that I use percussion and the untuned percussion, and it had you have to put in individual instances to get separate instruments. There might be a way to do it differently, but so you can see I have one instance for cymbal crashes and one instance for timpani drums. And so if I add these in, this is what it sounds like as we get into that section. And so it kind of continues like that for the rest of the pattern. So that was what I did from a recording standpoint, and that's where we're going to pause the video for now. So the next thing that I did was to kind of round out the percussion, and I use a technique that I use a lot of times, which is to basically just start with a single element, replacing the click track with, in this case, it was a kick drum, and you can see, kind of started off, you see the low velocity here, so it starts out a little bit on the softer side. If we go all the way back to the beginning of the song, gets louder. Adding a couple elements at a time. So here we add a cymbal crash. And then for the chorus. So pretty simple, just a little ascending tom fill there. And that is more or less the pattern that follows us all the way through the song. That we just kind of go with the continuous pulse of the kick drum. As we get into these bridge segments, we added a little bit of cymbal work. So not much to that, just a little bit of a tap on the ride. And then in the next bridge section, I think we added a little bit more. Since it was leading into that orchestral section, we had a little bit different bridge there. And then in the last bridge section, just kind of went back to that same pattern with the pulse and then the ride cymbal. So this section kind of layers the cymbal crash of the verse with the tom fill of the chorus. Which kind of it suggests what's going to happen later in the song or when I add additional instruments. So that was the idea behind the percussion. Then it was time to start thinking about what was kind of the lead instrumentation going to be, which was going to be the guitar. Here, we'll turn off all this soloing because we've got a lot of it. And I wanted to think first about the guitar tone. So I put together a signal path, which I will share with you here. Here's my signal path. So it starts with the ripped speaker over here. I haven't always been a strong adherent to the idea of pedal order, but here I actually wanted to make sure I had some sensitivity so I could kind of roll on and roll off the fuzz technique using volume or using picking dynamics if I chose to do that. So the rip speaker is first in the chain. The Keeley compressor is second in the chain, which I used for both sustain and a little bit of drive. And I did not use these two pedals simultaneously. They were kind of two different sounds. And then I used the pitchfork to kind of give me some of an octave effect that I was looking for. And you can see that I have the mix, the blend right here, down pretty low. So it's mostly the dry signal, but still enough of the octave that you can definitely hear it sort of chiming above. So that was the signal chain for the guitar. And then it was time to start thinking about the arrangement. So you can see that I've kind of stuck with the way that I originally recorded it. I had, sort of an intro section where I brought in the bass, then into this verse right here. Sorry, giving it away a bit here. I'm going to mute the guitar channels. So this is my verse, and then I have the chorus, and then the bridge. So that was the way I recorded them, and it's the way it stayed. I did not move the pieces around in any way or use them in a different manner. I didn't extend them at all. So it was just a matter of coming up with what are the guitar parts going to be for that. So a big part of that decision was the individual tones. So let's now go back to our mixer here. So you can see there are no effects in the DAW inside. All the effects were on the pedal chain that I showed you. And we're just going to solo the guitars for now so we can hear the tones. So what was I going to do for the intro and bridge sections? I decided to go with just kind of a sustained harmonic, but I want to zoom in and kind of illustrate exactly how I achieved that. So perhaps a person with more dexterity could have done this with the volume knob. That person isn't me. So again, as I've shown in many videos before, I tend to double all of my guitar parts. And here, same thing, a left and a right panned signal. But I use this this tool here, the fade in tool, to basically take the attack off of this sound. So I'm gonna take it away. Whoops, that's not how I do that. It can be a little hard to grab at times. Yeah. Anyway, so if I just demonstrate it here, so you can hear that strike. So if I undo that, you can see how it diminishes the waveform at the attack, and you don't hear the strike as much. It comes on more gradually. And if we listen to it with the full composition, then you can see that even more. Let me shrink this down a bit. So starting from the beginning. So it fades in and then fades out. Then I wanted something, because I have a pretty involved bass part here for the verse. I didn't want the guitar part to compete with that too much, so I went with something very simple. So let's listen to it. those two notes, just an A and a C, and just, kind of doing a little bit of repeat there, such that the bass almost becomes the melodic instrument and the guitar becomes the rhythmic instrument. But the inversion of the pitches there, the very treble heavy guitar sound, brings it to the forefront. So it gives it kind of an interesting texture. And then, as we get to the end of any section, you can see that I'm letting the guitars ring out, and it's kind of settling in under the other parts, but you don't really hear them. Again, pretty simple, suitable for a chorus, and it begins to take on an almost organ-like sound with the octave that the pitchfork puts in, and with the fuzz effect. So that's with the verse part is with the Keeley compressor providing all of the overdrive and sustain, and then the chorus part is with the ripped speaker providing the overdrive and sustain. So still very similar high gain structure. High gain signals with a lot of sustain, but very different tones. And then you can hear how the guitar fades in that bridge section, again using that fade in, just kind of curving off and reducing the dynamics of the strike on that harmonic note. So we repeat this, and again through the chorus and again through the bridge, and then we get into this long orchestral breakdown section. And here I went for an even more intense fuzz tone, and I recorded the parts 2 measures out of sync with one another, so that we're going to get this kind of left to right, back and forth kind of sound. So let's listen to it. We'll come into it from the bridge. The sense of how it kind of goes back and forth, and it's not in like a swishy rotor kind of sound. It's almost like if you were on a battlefield and there were explosions or cannons firing to either side, was kind of the idea that I had there. So, and that is again with the fuzz pedal, but on this particular instance I turned the rip way up, so that it got a lot more grating, I guess, is the sound for the fuzz pedal. And then finally, after one more chorus and the bridge, then we come to a section where we play the chorus and verse parts together. So that's kind of the coda of the song. The last 16 measures, or I think it actually trails off to about 20 measures with some of the fade out sounds. That's where we are right now. So that's what happened off camera. Next, we're going to start thinking about what happens on camera. So again, we're going to kind of work on this song live. The next segment is going to be taking some lyrics and applying some vocals. Okay, we're back. So the next step, as I mentioned, is to start laying down vocals. And before we can lay down vocals, we actually have to write some lyrics. which, believe it or not, I did between the last recording session and this one. It didn't take me too long because I had an idea that I started with. So as I mentioned in the Phrygian episode and at the beginning of this episode, this song was called Gypsy. And I'm saying was because it's changed. And that's simply because the Phrygian scale is also sometimes known as the Gypsy scale. But I had this section of the song, this part right here, the guitar, the main part for the guitar. So I kind of took that cadence and I was like, well, what would I say? How would I tie that back to this idea of gypsy? And what I came up with is, you are nothing but a gypsy. And it fit the pattern. It kind of had an interesting dramatic lean to it, but it's also kind of calling someone a gypsy, which didn't seem very nice. So I thought, well, what's another word that would fit in there? And I came up with memory. You are nothing but a memory. And that, to me, is pretty rich ground. I'm sure all of us have people that we look back on in our lives and think that they are nothing but a memory. Whether that's a good memory, a bad memory, it is for each of us to decide on our own. So with that idea of you are nothing but a memory, I set to writing and came up with these lyrics here that you can see. And so what I usually do then, as I put this together, is I'll kind of start, I'll write one section. In this case, I wrote the verse section first. And then I had an idea that I wanted to do some spoken word, which you can see here in the italics for that long kind of halftime breakdown session. So I had that, and then I just needed some idea for the chorus. So I wanted that to sort of fit thematically and tie the whole thing together. And that's how I came up with these lyrics. So the next step for me when I'm recording a song is to lay down what I would call a guide track. And this is, I'll apologize in advance because it's probably not going to be extremely tuneful. I haven't rehearsed it. I'm not really paying attention to what key I'm in. I'm going to actually let the computer analyze that for me, and possibly use some pitch correction tools to help get things on target. But this is kind of what it looks like. So let's flip over to the Studio One screen and open up the vocals folder. And you can see at the top of the list there, I've got this thing called guide track. And for me, a guide track is I just sing it all the way through once. I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to phrasing. It's just a way for me to hear the words played back to me through a recording. So we're going to put the song all the way back to the beginning. I'm going to get my headphones on. I'm going to unhook them from that so I don't hurt myself. So I've got my headphones on. And I'm glad I'm hearing some echo in my headphones, and that's because I didn't fix my sample rate. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to turn my sample rate back down to 128. Back down to 128, and now that echo is gone and the latency is gone. Good way to remember that. So here we go. We're going to start out, and I'm going to lay down this guide track. Hope is nothing but a memory. Love is nothing but a memory. Looking back, who was wrong? Conscience clear. looking back, you were wrong. Future clear, moving on. Time is nothing but a memory. Lies are nothing but a memory. Time is nothing but a memory. You are nothing but a memory. So that's our guide track. Let's go ahead and save that. And as I mentioned, what I'll then do is I'll use Melodyne, which is the pitch correction software that I use for all of my songs. And then I'm just going to kind of see where I was, because I'm sure I wasn't on pitch, but this is my process for figuring that out. So here we are. Yeah, so I'm in E, G, and somewhere around a D-ish. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a look. All right, so it looks like here for the spoken word part, I kind of went down a little bit. All right, but fairly consistent. Somewhere, yeah. So we're going to figure some things out here. I'm going to spend some time going through and possibly recording some of the sections. So we'll come back to that in the next segment. Okay, so we're back. So I went ahead and went through the Melodyne file, and as you can see, I normalized and cleaned up the verse, chorus, second, final chorus, and then this kind of coda, which is a run out of the verse mixed in, and just kind of put these. They're like a harmony above the melody, so instead of being in A, they're in E. But I got everything straightened out. And again, these are not what I'm going to use, but it just gave me the opportunity to kind of see what key I wanted this to be in, and to make sure that everything sounded good. I did not bother fussing with at all the spoken word part. That's just going to come out how it comes out. In fact, I might end up using the scratch track part. But the next step for me is to start figuring out how I'm going to lay this in. So in my template, I've got it set up for kind of some left and right chorus and bridge vocals, and then a background vocal section plus a lead vocal. And that's probably not the way I'm going to use it this time, so we're going to just create a spot for the verse. Verse guide. We'll have chorus, guide, and then we'll have spoken word. And what I'm going to do now is I'm basically just going to take the slice tool, and I'm going to cut this vocal track into kind of its component parts, trying to get it in between where I'm not cutting into the actual vocal. So now with all those different parts, so I can pull this, and this, down to the verse guide track so that when I record those, that's where they'll go. Spoken word, I'm going to leave that right where it is. And then these three pieces will pull down to chorus guide. So now, as I go through and record the actual verse, what I'll do is I'll leave these guide tracks in my ears because they are correctly pitched. That'll help me to stay on key while I'm actually singing. And like I was really late on this here coming in. You probably heard it and it sounded terribly awkward. And it was. So, you know, I might record that section actually looking at the timing so that I don't come in late. And then, you know, just trying to match the cadence of this because I felt like the cadence of the lyrics came out pretty good. So that's going to be the next step, but I just wanted to set myself up for that, and might be a little bit of overlap there. So we'll kind of zoom in and trim off the pieces we don't need. So there. Okay. So when we come back next, I'm going to record all this stuff off camera so you don't have to hear my hundreds and hundreds of throwaway takes. But we'll come back and we'll take a look at where things netted out. Oh, and we can also get rid of these two tracks. So just kind of clean things up. And I'm still leaving in this envelope here for synth tracks because I might decide to add some other instrumentation to this if it sounds too repetitive or too spare. It's pretty short, so I don't know that I will, but if it needs it, I'd rather leave it here and take it out later than take it out and have to put it back. So that's going to be our plan, and we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back after I've recorded some of those vocal tracks. Okay, so we're back after a little break, and I'm going to go over some of the things that happened while I was off camera. Basically what I did, as I said I was going to do, was I went ahead and recorded in those vocal parts. So I recorded in the verse parts, the chorus parts separately, and then I did the spoken word part, or the breakdown as I'm calling it, as one piece, but I decided that because I did that effect where I had the guitar strikes kind of alternating between the left and right channel, I decided to take these parts here, the breakdown parts, I can show you in the mix window, and split them, pan them 50% left and right so that they are on the opposite side of where the guitar, the fuzz guitar is. So let's just give a quick listen to that part right now. I wrote long letters. For a while you wrote back to me. Sometimes I would call, but you wouldn't be home. So you can hear how that kind of goes back and forth. And you can also hear that I once again forgot to change sample rate because I was recording at 128. So now we've switched it back to the highest, 2048, and it should sound clear when we listen to the rest of it right now. I kept your picture on my wall, but where only I could see it. When we were together, I never felt so all alone. So there you have it. That's the back and forth effect there. And speaking of effects, there were some things that I did with the effects chains. So first thing I did was I wanted to match the reverb that I was using for the bass track. So you remember I was using a sidechain reverb there. For the vocal, I'm using a slightly different technique, but it's still the same setting. And this is the pure reverb technique that I learned from one of the Personas videos by Craig Anderton, which is basically you use the same reverb effect on two different channels, but you use a mix tool to reverse the polarity of the send on one of them. So it takes all of the dry signal out, and it ends up kind of lifting the vocal above the rest of the mix. So that's the effect that tends to have. So that's what I did, and I used the Cathedral, which is the same setting that I used for the for this regular reverb over here. That was the sidechain reverb effect. And then the other thing, put a little bit of red light distortion on there, and a little bit of EQ to kind of. I found the fundamental frequency once I got everything in the key that I wanted to sing it in, and then just kind of amplified that for a little bit of clarity. And then the last thing I did was I used this pedal board plugin, and that gave me the ability to apply a dual band compressor and a little bit of overdrive just to the verse, so that came through a little bit more. So let's go ahead and listen to this all the way through from the beginning, and you can see some of the effects that are in play. There's nothing but a memory. Okay, and it looks like my audio interface is choking right now. Hold on, let me restart that. So we'll take a pause there and just point out, you can kind of hear how the pieces of the song are coming together. So that's pretty much it for the song. I'll post a link to the finished mixdown, which I still have to do. Actually, I have to do the mixdown of it. But I'll post a link to that on SoundCloud. That'll be up for a little while, so you can listen to the whole thing without me blathering over it. But for now, just kind of wanted to wrap things up. So first thing I want to say is, ooh, look, we still have the lyrics up there on the page. Well, you can sing along there. Take a screenshot. So I just, if you watch this video, I'll put a link to the previous video, the Let's Get Phrygian video, so you can see what the starting point was for this song, and now you see kind of the end point. Although there probably will be a little bit more fine-tuning of the mix. I don't think I'm going to bother with adding any other instrumentation. I feel like it's it's got all the things that it needs, and maybe just sanding a few of the rough edges. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing. I love having more than 9 subscribers, which is what I have so far. So let's get to 10. Yay! And also please leave a comment if you found this at all interesting, or if you have any questions for me. Happy to answer them. Thank you as always for your attention, and we'll see you again next week. Until then, take care of yourself.